ho, ho! Jolly bollocky ho to you all, listeners! 'Tis me, the chief festive operator in town, Mr. Christmas. I hope you've all behaved yourselves fanatically well this year, because if not, I won't be swimming up through your sewage pipes and leaving my still moist offerings under your pretty tree. No! I'll be sneaking into your bedroom and filling everything I can find with coal. Everything! Ho ho ho! Now, I'll tell you someone who hasn't been behaving very well this year. Little Tom Crowley. He's been working so hard putting together all the episodes of Crowley Time, plus the Faces of Virtue episodes, Patreon-exclusive bonus materials, and so on, that he hasn't made any sort of headway into making all the toys for the good little children of the world. So now he has to solder together 3 billion PlayStation 5 Pros in the next 2 hours. Tom!
Yes, your jolliness.
Take care, there are some very fiddly components in those consoles, and they're very expensive.
I will, my lord, I promise.
Good. Ha!
Oh.
Ho ho ho! Well, while Tom combs this thick pile carpet for those microchips, here's a special festive treat for all you delightful listeners. It's a special edition of Drama Parlour with Sir Chuntley Buffingham, featuring a ghostly tale for Christmastide, as is the tradition. So don't say we never do anything nice for you. Or it's coal time. Ho 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 ho.
Merry Christmas to thee, dear listeners. I'm Sir Chuntley Buffingham, professional actor, available for hire for most any occasion. But my policy is that I only do Santa for really upscale gigs, like footballers' children's parties and very classy burlesque. Welcome to my drama parlour, where the chill of terror meets the warmth of the fireside armchair, and they have a baby, and the baby is stories. Tonight's short festive tale of the skin-flayingly awful is by that master of the uncannily cozy shocker, Mr. M.R. Johns. In case you were wondering, the M.R. stands for Minority Report. Mr. Minority Report Johns. And this classic tale of the bowel rattling is called Lord Bastardly's Trousers. Professor Matthew Pratting rang the reception bell once. Then, after a moment, he rang it again. Then he rang it repeatedly in the machine gun fashion that signals to all within earshot that you are dealing with an absolutely top-shelf tosser, until the rotund barrel-like innkeeper peeped his red appley head out from the back. "Now just listen, my good man," said Professor Pratting. "I have reserved a room. I should like to be shown to that room, and then I should like to be left alone. I am here to walk about the nearby countryside and prod my finger into old ruined architecture and suspicious mounds, and I'm not having any crass present-day people being all working class at me and ruining it." The innkeeper frowned slightly and said something in local that sounded to the professor like, "Nah, nah, nah," and although he hadn't understood a word, Pratting said, "Good," threw his suitcase at the man and marched up the stairs. The following day, having consumed a handsome breakfast of kippers that he was not aware were absolutely drowning in the innkeeper's gob, Professor Pratting went on a big walk around the local area. He was wearing a flat cap and those long socks that go all the way up to your knees and you tuck your trousers into them. Or maybe the trousers are short. Or both? Whatever the case, he was also wearing formal brown shoes that were incredibly uncomfortable and profoundly unsuited to cross-country walking. And all this he did because this was in the past. Not the very long ago past, like Victorians, but the quite long ago past. Like maybe there has been a world war, or maybe not. And also because he was a ponce. "Oh look, a bit of an old ruined church, brilliant," was the sort of tedious thing that the professor was in the habit of thinking. He never thought anything fun, like, I bet you could use your socks to make a slingshot for firing hamsters, or they should do a detective show where the detective is an astronaut. You know, fun stuff. He never thought anything like that. Anyway, he had just thought the thing about old ruined churches because he'd just seen a bit of one across a field. It wasn't much more than a bit of one wall and a mostly broken stained glass window, but that was exactly the sort of boring thing that really got the professor going. Christ, I ask you. The professor spotted a local codger nearby, smacking some wet long johns against the wall of his cottage. That was the sort of thing people used to do back then, wasn't it? Unless he was a strange local pervert who got his kicks smacking his wet long johns against other people's cottages. Ugh. Or even worse, maybe he got a sick thrill from breaking into other people's cottages, stealing their long johns, wetting them with something or other, God only knows, then smacking them against cottage walls, be they his or someone else's. What a horrible old codger that would be. Anyway, the professor wasn't thinking anything like that either. He was just thinking that perhaps this long john smacking pleb could be of some use to him. "Excuse me," the professor said extremely slowly, like he was overseas and about to ask a foreign restaurateur whether they did chips. "That church, built when?" The codger followed the direction of the professor's finger, saw what he was pointing at, and went very pale. He gibbered something in regional, waved his hands back and forth in the universal gesture of "No way, Jose," and ducked into the cottage, dropping the soggy long johns in the mud in his panic. Must be some sort of eccentric provincial custom, thought the professor, which really was exactly the sort of arse-numbingly dull thing he tended to think, like I was saying before. Closer up to the ruin, Professor Pratting could see that alongside the small bit of wall and window, there was also a boxy little stone tomb of some sort. He could also see that the tomb was depicted in the stained glass. What little of the design had not yet been destroyed seemed to show a person standing in front of the tomb, which lay open. The person could only be seen from the waist down, where the legs seemed to be flailing about in some sort of mad dance. They were clad in some old-fashioned black trousers, even more old-fashioned than the professor's trousers that tucked into his long socks, or maybe they were just short or both. These were the sorts of medieval-type trousers, well before any world wars may or may not have happened, with laces around the waist and around the calves, like everyone back then was desperate to cut off all the blood supply specifically just to their upper thigh and groin areas. In fact, maybe that's what they were doing. After all, they were funny about that sort of thing, weren't they? Anyway, right, those were the sorts of trousers the legs in the stained glass were wearing, and also they were on fire. The legs were on fire, and there were lightning bolts firing at them from around the extremes of the window pane. And while it was a bit hard to make out, it looked like a dark, shadowy, cloaked figure was winding up to insert a garden hoe into the legs' rear at great speed and with extreme prejudice. Along the bottom of the window was written in Latin, "Nihil putus on ye pantalonus." Neat, thought the professor, and he flipped the lid off the stone tomb, too quickly to read that engraved on it was the name Lord Malicioustifer Bastardly. Wouldn't you know it, inside it a pair of very old-fashioned black trousers lay neatly folded. The professor ignored the disembodied child's voice, whispering, "Death," pulled the trousers out and experimentally unfurled them against his legs. "Just my size," he said to nobody in particular, perhaps the disembodied child who had just whispered to him, and hopped out of his impractical walking shoes, better to pull off his own kecks and yank on the forbidden legwear. "Gosh, they fit absolutely perfectly," said the professor, before very soon after continuing, "In fact, they fit very snugly. No, wait, they're really pinching now. It's almost as if they're getting smaller. Hello, who's this?" he said out loud, noticing the black-cloaked figure on the horizon, marching directly towards him with great speed. "Hello there," he shouted out cheerily to the figure. "I'd come over to meet you, but it seems as though both my legs are now totally immobilized. It must be these dratted trousers. They're so tight that they're almost starting to feel oddly hot." Trust the onion-chewing cow-shit rakers in this neck of the woods to make properly fitting garments, eh? He chuckled. It's a shame, otherwise I'd have gladly come over to help you carry your tools. It was just at the moment that Professor Prating recognized the implement carried by the shadowy figure as a garden hoe that the trousers burst into flame. The end. Ah, what a classically foreboding yet oddly relaxing tale that is, listener. Surely it must be counted alongside the author's other greatest works, like The Bishop's Secret Journal, wherein the snobbish professor protagonist reads a mysterious journal and gets killed by a ghost. Or For Christ's Sake Don't Come Here, wherein the snobbish professor protagonist goes somewhere and gets killed by a ghost. Or The Scrotum Rending Crypt, wherein the snobbish professor protagonist unexpectedly spends an uneventful weekend hill-walking with his sister, and then they all have a nice lamb dinner in the pub. I don't like that one as much. I hope this tale of the weird introduced an unsettling little chill to your otherwise comfortable Yuletide, dear listener. But aside from this spine-tingling sojourn, I hope that the rest of your Christmas is peaceful and quiet, unless you're an unreasonably wealthy person in need of either a very wholesome or a very naughty Santa Claus, in which case you can get in touch at the usual address. But to all you others, God rest ye, until next we meet in a dank, dimly lit corner of the drama parlor.
Keep combing, Tom. I count at least 3 power management chips still sitting in that carpet somewhere.
Yes, your Christmassiness.
And make it snappy. I've got young people to delight. Oh, hello, listeners. You're back. Well, I hope you enjoyed that creepy festive treat. Tom and I wish you all the very best for a festive and peaceful end of the year, and best wishes for a promising and prosperous 2025. And with that,
Actually, Mr. Christmas, I wondered if I could step out of character for a moment.
What, right now?
Yes, if that's all right.
Well, it's a little unorthodox, but I'll allow it.
Thanks. Hello, listeners. As I say, this is a less scripted and staged statement from me than normal, because I wanted to take a moment to just say very sincerely from the heart how much I appreciate you listening to this show, particularly over this last year, which has been quite a big year for the show, which I'll talk about more in a second. Really, I think the key thing to say here is that I appreciate you listening to the show and sticking with it so much. I really love making Crowley Time, and it's certainly a joy and an important thing that I can kind of express myself as a performer and a writer and a comedian through this show, and I really feel like I found my dream medium for that with Crowley Time. But the reason for making it is, of course, that people will hopefully listen to it. And this year, more people than ever have done. And it's been such a joy to see the numbers building up and to hear from you and how much you enjoy the show. And also, in some cases, that it's actually brightened difficult times for you, which, of course, as I've said before, is the loftiest ambition that a comedian can ever hope to reach for. So I really appreciate people letting me know. And I'm so grateful to all of you for continuing to listen. As I say, this has been a very big year for the show and for the Patreon. In terms of download numbers, unless I've got my facts mixed up, I'm pretty sure that across the last 12 months, we've passed both the 100,000 download mark and the 150,000 download mark. So that shows you the kind of exponential growth that we've seen, which has been so encouraging to me. As has the fact that lots of people have signed up for the Patreon this year, but also now that I've introduced some higher donation tiers, quite a lot of people have signed up for them, which is a huge help to me as well, surviving in what can be quite a difficult industry to make money in, as I'm sure most of you know. On that topic, you may have heard this as well, but this has been a truly atrocious year for the entertainment industry, particularly all broadcast, film, television and radio. We've seen cuts and a reduction in opportunity like we've never seen before, really. Worse than during the COVID lockdowns, worse than the 2008 financial crisis, and cumulative number of things have sort of all rolled into 2024, I believe on record being the bleakest year for employment prospects for anybody working in the entertainment fields. Not just performers and writers like me, but also all crew, producers, people working behind the scenes have also really struggled this year. So like many other people, I have been hunkering down and hoping that I will, as people have been saying, survive till 2025.
Some people think that next year is already looking a bit more hopeful, but there's also some people saying that in many cases, what we're looking at, particularly in the United Kingdom, in this country where I live, this is something of a new normal. Now, I really hope that's not the case, because I really love and believe in broadcast radio. I love scripted television. I love movies. And I hope that those are not steadily going the way of the dodo. I think people still love them. I hope that they will start to grow again. But you never know. You never know in an industry as uncertain and wobbly as this one. You never quite know where trends are going to head. So all of this is just to say thank you for your support across this year. And while I won't say to you listening, give me money, give me all of your money. Of course, I love it when you do, but I won't specifically say that. But what I will say across the board is if there is a musician, a band, or a comedian, or a team of people, team of artists, team of writers, anyone that you love, whose work you truly love, there's never been a more important time for you to support in every way, but particularly financially, the people whose work you really love. So if you've been putting off buying that album on Bandcamp from some artist you love, if you've been hemming and hawing about buying a ticket to go and see a comedian or a play or whatever, if you're in a position to do so, take the opportunity and do it in the new year. Make 2025 the year that you let all those people who are fighting to make work and get it out into the world, make this the year that you show them your support. And what I will ask, specifically from me, is that you tell people about Crowley Time. As well as every other thing that you love, every other creative and person making work that you love, support them, tell people about them as well. But in particularly, the one thing I will ask all of you to do, because it's free, is to tell people about Crowley Time. If people say, why is there no sketch comedy on TV anymore? Tell them, hey, well, it's a podcast, but give Crowley Time a try. Every opportunity you get, suggest Crowley Time. Write messages on the notice board at work, post things on social media, tell friends over the dinner table, family over the sewing machine, tell people about Crowley Time, because I, like every other person fighting to make work independently at this tricky time, depend on word of mouth. And the more people you tell, the more listeners I get. And then the more reach my work has and the more money it brings in. And therefore, the more I'm able to take this show seriously, which, and as I say, I've been able to do more than ever before this year. And I hope to keep that going. I hope to keep that moving forward. And the show gets bigger and bigger. My ambitions for it get bigger and bigger. And hopefully that makes it funnier and funnier. And what I promise you is that in the meantime, I will continue to pour all my love and affection and ambition and experimentation into this show to make it more and more the thing that you signed up for in the first place. And of course, in the immediate future, that will mean making Madrigal in Margate Part 2, the barnstorming conclusion that you're waiting for, full of more laughs, more action, more punching, and more passive aggression than you could have ever hoped for from the Madrigal or the Crowley Time franchises. And in the spirit of unscripted sincerity, I will now read out the list of executive producers and supreme champion producers that I want to thank from the Patreon, but just as myself, with no bells and whistles, only authentic 100% Crowley honesty and love. The executive producers: George Cantor, James Roberts, Michaela McNally, Brian Shymick, Gigi Catherine, Tobias Anderson, Kim M., James Rayliff, Paul Tiemann, Aileen Joins, Dr. The Eliminator, Diggory Laycock, Meme, Andy Case, Amanda Waterman, Samantha Dye and Peter Shanks, Matt Luckuck, and Katrina Powers. And of course, thanks to the incredibly generous Supreme Champion producers, Purple Strawberry and Laurel Carlson. That's all from me, just me, Tom, outside of any kind of character, other than to say Merry Christmas, or Merry whatever it is that you celebrate at this end of the year, or Merry doing nothing if you don't observe any holidays. And either way, a happy start to 2025 to all of you. Thanks very much, Mr. Christmas. It felt really good to say all that stuff.
That's all right, Tom. Now, are you back in character? You've stopped being the writer and performer Tom Crowley who makes this show, and you're back to being the slightly different Tom Crowley who appears as a character within it.
That's right.
Then get back to work. I have billions and billions of fictional children to deliver PlayStation 5 Pros to, who in the reality of this program are waiting for you to build every single last one of them. Unlikely though that sounds, but that's the premise we're working with here, and therefore you'd better get your skates on as long as you're responsible for the happiness